they don't have access to a lot of different medications, but they will for, Tylenol, cough medicine. They'll get into just their parents' prescription medications, and they'll just take whatever they can. But I've noticed that, so I've been adding these in since 2018. It started, this one started, and it was kind of a couple years before we really got our feet underneath us and we knew what we were doing with the Opiate Coalition and everything. But I've seen more, seems like, people trying to harm themselves with drugs than before. So I think that's interesting, especially our teenage youth. There's a lot of that. Tons of.
So that was all rolling?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't want to ask.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
And
We have a ton of pediatric THC use because of getting into gummies that their parents might have or caregivers might have laying around. So that's, there was some concern over overdoses at schools, which doesn't really happen very much. We don't get called to schools very often for an opiate overdose, and we would. So there's not a whole lot of naloxone being distributed, but we do see a lot of THC in terms of gummy use. So
it's interesting. So you said you're seeing a lot of teenagers trying to harm themselves. So
Yeah.
whereas before people may have been overdosing, not trying to harm themselves,
Right.
but trying to numb themselves.
Yeah.
And fentanyl was mixed in, but you're saying that now you're actually seeing overdoses from people trying to harm
yeah,
themselves.
our intentional overdosing, and not necessarily opiates, but in a younger community trying to harm themselves, those numbers have gone up. They've risen dramatically over the last 12 months. They're not successful at it, but that's a bigger problem that I think community health needs to sort of concentrate on. What is going on with our young folks all of a sudden, that they're taking all these prescription medications or anything they can just to try to help harm themselves.
Obviously you guys are going out there and talking to these people. I mean, what do you attribute that to?
It's hard. I mean, while we do talk to them a little bit on scene, typically somebody's in an emotional state where they're not willing to discuss a whole lot. What's going on? I mean, we do have a lot of folks in group homes. We have a lot of group homes in the city of Toledo. And we have some really young folks in there that are very, very at risk for, mental health issues and obviously traumatic issues that they've had to deal with. That's why they're in a group home. And I think it's a really, really heavy burden for these folks to carry. But I couldn't really assume why they're wanting to harm themselves. But we do have some usages. Our numbers have gone out of group homes and those types of things.
But as far as like what you're seeing, clearly we're seeing fewer overdose deaths than we've seen in previous years. I mean, just talk about that. I mean, you guys are seeing that.
Yeah, we are. And we're still seeing, what's an acceptable amount of people that the community is willing to lose to opiate overdose every month? We're now, 2-3 years ago, we were in double digits. We were anywhere between 12 and 20 deaths a month. Now we're seeing 7, 8 a month. Still too many, right? But so the opiates are still out there. And why aren't we being called on some of these? The Lucas County Opiate Coalition and the Health Department has been doing just tremendous work with community health, getting out there, making naloxone available, making education available. We personally have a Leave It Behind program that we started during COVID when all the recovery centers were shut down. We were the only resource for naloxone to the community that was suffering with an opiate epidemic during COVID. So I think that all these different folks coming together trying to fight this problem has been successful to some degree. And not to forget about Toledo Police and what they're doing, trying to keep the product off the streets. They've worked really, tirelessly trying to do that. So I think it's a combination of things and why we're seeing these things go down. But there's been a tremendous education over the last 4 years trying to get people to understand how dangerous these drugs are and that fentanyl is literally in everything. We had career heroin users, people knew exactly how much to take to get the effect that they wanted, suddenly dying because it's now fentanyl, not heroin. And while we don't see many of those seizures anymore, we take part of a monthly drug through law enforcement drug call each month to talk about drug seizures and trends that are happening out there. And while fentanyl seems to be coming down, they are still mixed in very interesting ways that would lend to overdose and death.
And you mentioned naloxone, and when I was talking to the health department, Maj over there,
Sure.
she said, sometimes people that even they wear fentanyl patches, and they keep that on hand because, hey, if for some reason I'm outside mowing the yard and you see me pass out, you can give it. So is it your belief that because this is so easily available now that maybe these people are still overdosing, but they've got someone with them that's able to bring them back without calling you guys?
It certainly could be. I mean, we've always had about 30% of our overdoses, those reversals in the field, sign AMA not to go to the hospital, AMA against medical advice. It's always our advice for those folks to have had an overdose reversal in the field to go to the hospital in hopes of making sure they get connected with resources. About 30% of those folks every month choose not to do that. They are on their own. So wouldn't it surprise me, although we don't have evidence to back that up, that if they're self-medicating themselves with naloxone, that they reverse the overdose in their home and then refuse to go to the hospital or have somebody call 911. Our direction is if somebody's overdosing and a bystander or a loved one delivers naloxone, that the first thing they do is call 911 to get us rolling there, and then we can, they don't have, we're going to do what's best for the patient. And if they're alert and oriented and have capacity to make decisions for themselves, they don't necessarily need to go to the hospital. We can arrange transportation to a recovery center if they choose to Zeph. We've partnered with Zeph to take in these folks 24 hours a day if they choose to. And we had a fair number of those folks that do say over the last couple of years that I want help with this. So we're able to get them cabs over to Zeph Center it's sort of like a clearinghouse place where it's a hub, and then they can then plug those folks into an appropriate program that'll work for them.
So what kind of other drugs? Obviously, when you're talking about Narcan, I mean, you can reverse an opiate, but you can't reverse a cocaine overdose. So what kind of, I've heard methamphetamines and cocaine are probably, cocaine's been pretty stable, I guess, throughout the years.
Right, it has.
But meth, that seems to be going up in the community. Are you seeing that?
We don't see a tremendous amount of methamphetamine on the streets, but we do the occasional, we'll see that. And the danger in that is that it's something that can be made locally. You don't have to necessarily go to an outside source to get it. So that's always been the fear, right? But typically that seems to be something like out in the rural populations. We see more historically the use in the rural communities because they don't have access to dealers of all these other drugs. Cocaine has been a constant, but at the same time we see problems with fentanyl being added to cocaine many times. We have a lot of folks that are revived on seeing to say, I just took cocaine, is what I'm used to taking. You can't play by those rules anymore. It's fentanyl or fentanyl-related drugs are in a lot of different things. But we have a lot of prescriptions out there. You're right. People that are in pain management, they do sometimes have fentanyl patches. We have people that abuse that. But then we have also folks that are not necessarily used to that or build up some sort of toxicity if you're older to it, that do find themselves overdosing on this, this fentanyl that was completely unintentional. They're not doing it for enjoyment, but it happens. So having that naloxone in the street helps. Benzodiazepines, we see a lot of times people take like medications for seizures and whatnot. We see a lot of abuse with those types of things in the field, and if they can't get a prescription for those things, they'll buy them from a dealer thinking it's gabapentin or something that they're using, Neurontin or something that they're used to taking, and they find out that it's something else. But there's a lot of use outside of the opiate that we still see. Alcohol is, we go on several a month of people completely unconscious from alcohol alone. I mean, we should consider these other things other than the opiates that's affecting, really having negative impacts on our community.
Yeah. Are you seeing a change in demographics or like areas of the city that you're seeing more overdoses
Yeah.
this year compared to like last year?
Yeah, over the last few years, there's been a trend. It was, we could pinpoint, and we worked with our health department through their NOS program to give them like almost real-time data so that they could set up pop-up stands in certain communities and deliver naloxone and education in those communities. We've since gotten away from that because it's not centralized. A couple of years ago, we could say if somebody died from an opiate overdose, chances are it was a 43605 zip code, or it was 43612 or 13 zip codes. Those were our three heaviest uses. Now it's spread across the city equally. 75–80% of our opiate overdoses and calls were for white males 3 years ago. Now it's spread out pretty close. Hispanic use has gone up, and African American use has gone up. So those communities have changed, especially with opiates. We're seeing more overdoses in those communities.
What do you attribute that to? I remember, like 2 decades ago, crack cocaine was
Right.
killing a lot of people in the black community.
Yeah.
There any reason for this shift in demographics?
I don't know what it is, other than access. I don't understand. The crack epidemic was obviously mismanaged in this country. It was too late before the country really woke up, because it was affecting a community that we just weren't really aware of, many of us, or maybe concerned with. I don't know. I think the country learned something from that, and when the opiate epidemic hit, there was sort of a thought, we're not going to let that happen again. So there were armies of people out there trying to combat the epidemic, a lot of education, a lot of resources available. And for the most part, it has only started really affecting the minority communities over the last couple of years. There was very few, you were single-digit percentages, which is still terrible, but in Hispanic communities and in African American communities. Now we're seeing double digits in African American communities for opiate use.
I was talking to somebody about this. It almost seems like when you're fighting the drug thing, it seems like playing whack-a-mole. Years ago it was cocaine, it was crack cocaine. Okay, we're gonna focus on that, and we're gonna burn it down, and then opiates pop up, and now maybe methamphetamines or something else. Is there some sort of drug out there that you're worrying that we're focusing everything on here, and something else is gonna pop up?
Well, with all the variations of fentanyl, there are meds out there. They haven't quite hit us, we start seeing in eastern Ohio, Cleveland area, southeastern Cincinnati, or coming in from Pennsylvania. There seems to be drugs out there that are opiates, but that naloxone is just not working on, or they'll put a combination of stuff on there. So we are seeing some different combinations of medications, and I think it is the sort of the drug trade trying to just stay a step ahead of law enforcement, trying to shut those drugs from entering our community. And the Toledo police and their vice officers have done a fantastic job with seizures and those types of things. But trying to understand why it's gone down the way it has is that would be a study all of its own.
Yeah. Has naloxone, I'm guessing it's just a game. How big of a game changer has it been? Clearly, we can see the numbers. People are saying, how big of a game changer has this been?
Well, it was, I mean, without naloxone or some sort of way to support somebody's respiratory effort, they're going to die. I mean, that's just the simple fact of it. So having naloxone out there and either given by a bystander or ourselves, I mean, we were giving naloxone almost on, oh my gosh, we were giving it on, I don't want to say in every run, but it seemed like that. Certain communities on the east side, it seemed like they were giving naloxone on everything. But these folks, these patients would have perished if it wasn't for that intervention. So obviously, having the medication in bystanders' hands is a benefit to everybody. The sooner you get it on board, the better. But if they're not breathing, that's not going to help them very much. So there's an education piece. So our Leave It Behind program is, open up the airway, position them in a proper way, obviously call 911 first. And then deliver the naloxone as directed by the manufacturer. And we've had some, real positives on that. Many times when we get on scene, naloxone's already been delivered and we have somebody who's starting to come to a little bit. It makes our jobs a little easier and it's better for the patient. The longer they lay there and they're not getting oxygenated, their brain starts to die from hypoxia.
I remember a couple years ago, we were having, city council meetings where people were talking about, we are spending huge amounts of money on Narcan, and we just can't afford it. And you heard people say, just let them die. These people want to die. Is this a problem anymore? I mean, are we still spending huge amounts of money, or is it available more to you and you're not having to pay as much?
Yeah, well, I would say, what's the top price are we willing to pay to save somebody's life? I mean, is it too expensive to save somebody's life? What are we going to do? At what point is it acceptable to say, we're just going to let that individual die or this community member die? And stigma with naloxone delivery and our Leave It Behind program has really been challenging for even members on our department. We had to have a lot of education because a lot of people, when we were in the midst of that epidemic, where they're going on the same person a half dozen times a week, they're saying, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Well, the hope is to keep that person living long enough for them to say, I've had enough and I want to get into recovery. And we did some work early on with the Lucas County Drug Court. And we had some strong evidence to suggest that if we just don't give up on these folks, that they will eventually get to a point where they'll seek help. And that's our job. Our job is not to determine whether this person has decided to check out or not. Our job is to keep them living long enough for them to make those appropriate decisions or change their lifestyle so that they can have a fruitful and happy, healthy life.
Really appreciate that answer. So how long have you been doing this? When we talk about you're the guy kind of tracking all this stuff, how long have you really been there on the front line dealing with this?
It started in 2018. We were all brought down to the government center, and we had a couple city council members at that time were starting to be very concerned about the deaths and the opiate use in their communities. So anybody that had anything to do with those types of things were brought into a meeting. And we had people from the Department of Justice, and we had folks from DART and Lucas County Health Department and Fire Department, TPD, and members of council. And we tried to figure out, say, what are we going to do from here? What do we do? And so the member from Department of Justice mentioned this OD map to me and said, this is used for law enforcement at that time, but if we can get this data put in there, we might be able to track where the hotspots are, and it can be used for patient care as well, for community health. So I started manually putting these overdoses in every day, and in the beginning it was really difficult. When COVID-19 hit our community, at that particular moment, we had the Opiate Coalition, who's always been a very, very robust coalition through Lucas County. We also had a Healing Community Study, which was a National Institute of Health funded from Ohio State and University of Cincinnati here, sort of assisting the coalition with trying to solve this problem. And they were providing a lot of resources to the community trying to get this up and running. Well, one of the things that we realized early on was when COVID hit, all these recovery centers, NOS, the syringe exchange programs, were shut down. Everything went on lockdown. There was no way to deliver this life-saving medication to the people that truly needed it. So at the meeting, I happened to mention, I said, we're still going on these runs. We don't close our doors. So if we can come up with a position where somebody's willing to give us these kits or naloxone, we would be happy to deliver those after an overdose. So, and the health department stepped up, as they always did, and said, we will give you these kits if you can deliver them. And so we started doing that. So anytime there was an overdose reversal in the field where somebody didn't go to the hospital, we would provide a kit so that they would have a lifeline to do exactly what we talked about earlier. Just keep them alive long enough until they can switch out of that habit. Toledo Police jumped on board soon after that, and they started carrying those kits as well. So here it was when there was no other options for these folks to have this life-saving medication. We were out there delivering it. And that was something I really felt proud of because we're a reactionary force. It's rare that we get ourselves in a position where we can be proactive in helping something in the future. So after close to 900 kits being delivered out to the public from us, about 10% of those being used on subsequent overdoses afterwards, that is, to me, huge. That's a number of people whose lives were positively impacted by having that medication. We have given them that naloxone to deliver to a loved one before we can get there, and they're saving lives with it. So to me, it was beneficial. But that's basically how we got into it, and we became a little bit more involved with the Opiate Coalition, and we have a Medics on Bike team that we are able to set up that can deliver kits throughout the community. We have and occasionally we'll set up tables at sort of like the East Side Community Center, for instance, and have kits available if somebody wants to come up and have those. And inside the kits, we have a lot of education in there. How to connect with recovery services, how to connect with DART. There's a resource in there for Mercy dealing with pregnant ladies that happen to have an opiate addiction so that they can find the resources they need for a healthy delivery of their baby. And then how to deal with an overdose if they encounter one.
So talk about the coordination that you guys have with the health department and DART, how you guys all work together.
Well, it's interesting, that the health department was driving this Lucas County coalition, opiate coalition. So members from all these recovery centers and anybody who had Social Security, anything that had to do with basic patient or community advocacy would show up at these meetings. And in the very beginning, I would just sit there and occupy a seat. It was something that we did. We wanted to support it, but we had no means to support it at all. So after that, we went from there to, once we realized how important the data that we could collect could be to the county, we became now a real sort of an active member in that. And we see that the folks from Lucas County Health Department with their education programs out there, they'll go out and give talks to people to obviously facilitate getting naloxone out to people. But we were able to provide data to them to how bad the situation was in the city or what kind of impact we're having. So I was very proud of our relationship with the health department because they've been just terrific partners for us. And in turn, we try to deliver them the data that they can use to go out and do the good work that they do. So that's the problem is, they needed data and our hands are tied with what we can do in the community. So it worked out great.
And two other things I want to touch on before I'd love to go over this map.
Sure.
But you mentioned 900 kits. What time frame was that?
That was since towards the end of 2019. So.
So just during a 1 year time frame or what?
No, that was since that 900
since
total. Yeah,
2000.
so since we've been
Okay.
doing that, and you have to remember, over the past 2 years, our overdoses have been gone down. That's a great thing. Our number of patients who sign AMA have gone down, which is also a great thing. And so, and then you have people who don't necessarily want a kit or admit that they've taken a drug and they feel that it's going to be some sort of admission, so they refuse the kits. So, but we have done some really strong work, and we're proud of the fact that we're able to have that positive, proactive stance in their community.
And then obviously you said a couple years ago. So when was the height of, hey, we're having overdoses all the time? And just give me a story about what that period was like.
It was so 21, 22. We're seeing 150 overdoses a month. They're not all opiates, but we're seeing double-digit deaths. We're seeing our fire crews running the wheels off their rigs to overdoses. It was exhausting for our crews. It is very, very difficult to watch somebody go through an overdose. You'll see a young, seemingly vibrant life being destroyed by the opiates. And so it was really, really taxing emotionally for our crews. It was very, very challenging for everybody involved. Trying to figure out what can we do, and we felt helpless. It seemed hopeless at that time. It seemed like we were just drowning in this stuff, and we would see our work with Little Police. We started providing them this data as well, so that they can make their seizures or see hot spots. Most people use very close to where they purchase the drug, so that would give them a lot of indication as where they should concentrate their efforts on. So, but it was exhausting. It really was, and it still is. Like I said, anytime you have to put in a death that seemed like it could be prevented, it's really troublesome. But at the same time, I think it screams to the community that we have a mental health problem, at least in our community. And a lot of those mental health issues eventually turn towards drug abuse. And homeless community, there was synthetic marijuana there for 1 year. That was it was creating zombies out in the field. And it really, it was a very cheap alternative to alcohol or other substances. So it was just really running rampant through our homeless populations. And these are folks that don't have any resources available to them for whatever reason, or whatever your personal opinions are. They were struggling to find access to folks that could help them. It's difficult to reach out to somebody that doesn't have a real address to help them. So they're lost in the system. But the mental health issues, I think, is the larger picture, and then that drug abuse stems from those mental health issues that we have to get a handle on. And the Mental Health Services Board has been terrific with providing resources out there, but I think they were struggling too with just the amount of need that's out there.
And my brother-in-law is a fire chief, and my cousins are like firefighters back east, and they would tell me stories that, we would save somebody in the morning, and then we would get called at like 4 o'clock and have to go save them again.
Yeah.
I'm sure you saw stories like
Yeah,
that.
it was frustrating. We had, like I said, we'd have those, a couple times, half dozen times a week going out there where people are overdosing every single day. And we could track those. So that would be then our friendship with DART, our partnership with DART, and getting those folks that are signing against medical advice. Part of the signature block against medical advice is that we are sharing your contact information with DART. And DART, within 72 hours, we get out there, knock on a door, and say, what can we do to help you? They've done a lot of hard work. They've pounded a lot of pavement trying to get those folks into some sort of recovery services. So there's all these folks working together. That was one of the first connections we had with DART. Lieutenant Rogers and myself were at an event over on the east side, an opiate town hall, and we were just discussing it, and he goes, boy, it really would be nice if we could get your run report data. And so I went to the chief at that time and city council, and they were like, I don't know, that's HIPAA and all this stuff. So then we decided, how about the against medical advice? So those are the people that don't go to the hospital. They don't have any resources available to them. They sign off and they're at home. And that was sound. As long as they signed out that form, that their information would be given to them. We would send those off daily to DART as they came in, and then they would go, those folks that sign against medical advice, and try to help them as best they can. And that's what really the goal of this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I would just ask you to kind of walk us through this, like what some of this information that you're
Sure.
able to share.
This is what we've seen in.
1 sec.
Sure.
Yeah, you can still sit where you were.
So certainly.
I'm all good.
Okay, so this is all of 2025 so far. And what is the information taken from our care reports gets put into this national database called ODMAP. And it puts a pin to where the overdoses occurred. And depending on the shape, it depends on how much naloxone was given to revive that person. The red triangles are unfortunate deaths that have occurred in that. So you can scan this in pretty close to get an idea of where we're going, but you can see they're scattered pretty evenly across the city. There's really no back a few years ago, you'd see this real heat spot on east side or out on the Lewis and Lasky and Jackman area. Those were huge hot spots.
You said there were like 3 really bad zip codes.
Yep. So you'd have the 43605, which is right in here, which continues to have its problems. I mean, you can see that we've had some deaths there. And then if you look over here when you're getting up to the Jackman, and you see the numbers have gone down, but that 43613 and 43612 area still sees a fair number of overdoses and deaths. But what is different in all this is the central Toledo. This is new over the past year or so. These numbers have gone up dramatically. There would always be sort of this dead zone, or I don't want to use that word, but there'd be a flat spot here where you wouldn't see very many overdoses. You would see a lot of synthetic marijuana use and all that other stuff, but you wouldn't see the opiate overdoses. And that has changed. The 43604, 43608 usage has gone up dramatically over that. And what's nice about this resource is we can break it down to whatever time frame you want to go to. So for instance, if you take a look at 680 total, 48 deaths, if we say we go to 22, and then let me see, it was 22.
Wow.
That's a little different. We had 137 deaths in 2022 and 1,400 suspected overdoses. And this is, it's significant when you see it on a map, and they can create hot zones, but it's interesting. So, and then if you,
Yeah, the one area in East Toledo, I mean, they're just
Yeah.
stacked on top of each other.
Yep,
I mean, was that
there you go.
fentanyl and mostly in East
Yeah.
Toledo?
Yep. So in 2021, you're looking at 2,100 overdoses. Nearly 200 people died. for that. And you'll look at some of these, the hot spots, and you'll see the deaths. This is all 43605. Is 43609. I mean, it was bad everywhere, but we would have certain concentrations that we're seeing more of. Now, 43611, Point Place had its fair share, but it is a significant amount of folks, and we're talking about Toledo, population of 280,000 people, right?
What's the difference between the red and the like the brown when you're talking about the deaths?
Yeah, these are the deaths, and the other ones were suspicious deaths or DOAs.
Oh, gotcha.
So, and if we want to go back to 2020, some of this stuff started to get. We were really hitting a groove in 2020 with our data. So some of the starts. There you go. That's the tough one.
So how often are you sharing this data with like DART or the health department? Is it daily? You said?
Well, it's gotten to be, we've gotten so busy with other things, we try to send it as I get it. So going through our overdoses every day is really challenging with the other work duties that we have. So at least monthly. And what I'll do is all of our community partners that want the data, I provide that to them. And so they get an idea, and we share it with the health department, obviously, DART, and then ProMedica. Toledo Hospital has a group of folks working on the opiates thing, so I share with them if they when they want it. So there's several people that we share this with, and they utilize the data for their own purposes, but that was what we can offer. We can offer the data, and I was very happy to do that. But and we can have, like, for instance, they changed this a little bit. Oh, here we go. So if you can look at, they break it down like what days of the week are typical. It's pretty consistent. Overdoses per month. This was back in 2020. It looks like May was a tough month for us. And then if you
does a lot of that correspond with, like, if a bad batch of heroin comes through the area?
Yeah, it does. It's more the bad batch from when I used to work with our friends from Vice. He said it was really not. I mean, it does happen, but most of it is just a fresh shipment. So, and when you have, where you start seeing the concentration of deaths, that is where you'll see the most use, because when somebody is afflicted with opiate, really a sickness, that need for an opiate, they tend to go where the most deaths are, because that's the strong stuff. And it's really, it's really sad.
I've heard that from multiple people, that if somebody finds out that, Jimmy, like, overdosed, and, they immediately want to figure out what Jimmy was taking. And I want some of that stuff because it's really strong.
It's a different way of thinking. It is, because these folks, you have the opiate. Not only is it doesn't necessarily work on a pleasure center. It destroys the pleasure center, so that in your brain, so that you continue to need more and more, chasing that original high. And so you get to the point where the actual structure of your brain is changing, the molecular structure of the brain is changing, where it's no longer acting on their own will. This is something that they need to survive, and that is difficult. A lot of people say, well, I know they're in rehab 8 times or 9 times or whatever. Yeah, that's how powerful these drugs are. That's how hard it is to beat these things. It takes a lot of work, and trying to find the right program. You got to find a program that works for that individual, and then you have to have a desire to beat it as well. And a lot of times is when we have, and I'm speaking out of school here, because I don't really know how this part works. But I think I know enough about this is like when you have somebody who goes to recovery and they're released from recovery to the same place where they started having these problems and the same people that they're having those problems, it's really difficult. It's challenging to stay clean when everybody you know is using it, or you're in a position of desperation where a lot of these folks do not live in happy places. They live in some desperate places. You were asking about the color coding here. So, for instance, this was a fatal overdose, the tan one, where a single dose of naloxone was delivered. Red is fatal, where they were dead. So there's no point, there's no intervention. And then the green were multiple. That means we're working these people all the way to the hospital. And so you'll see that. You'll see those green ones, for instance, is those are ones where our crews, and the tan ones, those are the ones where we're intubating those patients, we're providing CPR, getting them to the hospital, we're doing a lot of interventions. The red triangles, it's too late. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you for sitting out. I mean, that's fascinating to me and somewhat encouraging, but you know, there's still drug epidemic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still out there. I mean,
Yeah.
this isn't over.
No, it's not over. I mean, but when we're seeing these epidemic proportions, almost 3,000 overdoses in 2020, and losing 200, and like I said, this is usually on the light side. Our figures are more than that. So that is extremely significant. And giving 2,000 doses of naloxone, that's a lot of naloxone that's being delivered. So it is, and we, that data is valuable to, like I said, we don't really use the data, but it seems challenging for us not to share that data because folks do use it.
Yeah.
When you're trying to explain how bad the situation is, these are boots on the ground. These are people witnessing every one of those.
Yeah. All I get. So thank you very much.
Sure, my pleasure.